Welcome to this sleep documentary. Tonight, we're taking a calm, unhurried look at one ordinary place. Not to judge it, not to dramatize it, but to notice how it works, how it feels, and what it quietly tells us about the economy around it. If you're listening in bed, you can let the details pass by like streetlights. Nothing here needs your full attention. There won't be loud turns, harsh conclusions, or big predictions. Just one mall, gently observed. We're going to look at just one mall, not as a metaphor and not as a verdict. Just one place with a name, an address, and a set of doors that still unlock in the morning. Marley Station Mall sits along Governor Ritchie Highway in Glen Burnie, Maryland. Route 2, the long north-south road that carries people between errands and commutes, between Baltimore and the edges of Washington's Pull. And if you've been there, you already know the feeling. It isn't a dead mall in the dramatic sense. It's not a ruin. It's not a punchline. It's something quieter than that. A mall that's still standing, while also feeling in small ways like it's on its last legs. Not last legs as an insult, more like the way an old building or an old routine starts conserving energy. The way a place can keep functioning even when it's not being asked to do as much as it used to. That in-between state is exactly why one mall is enough. Because if you try to tell a story about malls in general, you end up with a slideshow of broad trends. All true but floating. A single mall makes those trends land somewhere real. Somewhere with hallways you can walk. Somewhere with lights that have to be paid for whether the corridor is crowded or empty. Somewhere with a food court that still has tables, even when the tables are mostly waiting. This is a case study, not a courtroom. And Marley Station is ideal for that, because it was built with real confidence, and because it's still open now, in a different kind of reality. A mall, in that original logic, isn't only a collection of stores. It's a machine that converts flow into stopping. It takes commuters, families, teenagers, retirees, and offers them a reason to turn in, park, and spend time indoors. So when we look at Marley Station, we're not asking, what happened to malls? We're asking something smaller and gentler. What happens to a machine like that when the flow still exists, but fewer people feel the need to stop? That's why we're staying close to one location, because economic change is often easiest to understand at human scale, in the small details, in which entrances get used, in which storefronts stay lit, in how far footsteps travel before they meet another person. And this is where the tone matters, because it's easy to talk about a mall like this with a sharp edge. But those words don't describe what you actually see on an ordinary day. On an ordinary day, you see a place that still has routines. You see a building that still takes care of its temperature. You see doors that still unlock. You see the economics of still open, still staffed, still paying for lights, still paying for security, still paying for climate control, still existing as a kind of local infrastructure, even when it's no longer the center of gravity it once aimed to be. So we're choosing one mall because one mall can hold all the layers at once. The optimism of its opening, the engineering of its comfort, the way it fit into the commute corridor, the way habits slowly changed, the way a system can continue quietly, even as it slows. And that's enough to begin. When I say Marley Station isn't a very good mall right now, I'm not trying to be harsh. I don't mean it as a review, and I don't mean it as an insult. I mean it in the most literal, gentle way, as an observation about how the building is being used today compared to what it was designed for. A mall is supposed to feel full, even when it isn't crowded. It's supposed to feel like there's always a reason to keep walking, not excitement necessarily, just momentum. And at Marley Station, that momentum comes and goes. Some days you can feel it in little pockets. A few stores doing steady business, a small line forming, someone carrying a bag, the food court quietly occupied. And then in the next corridor, the energy thins out again. The same building holds both realities at once. That's what not very good can mean in a place like this. Not that it's bad, but that it's uneven. Uneven light, uneven sound, uneven purpose. A cluster of activity, then a stretch of quiet. And the quiet isn't scary, it's just noticeable. It changes the way time moves when you're inside. Footsteps last a little longer. Music fills more space than it used to. The distance between people feels wider, even when nothing is wrong. In a thriving mall, you can drift without thinking. In a struggling mall, you become more aware of the drifting. You notice which doors are locked, which storefronts are dark, which parts of the building feel like they're waiting, and still, it opens. Still, the air conditioning runs or the heat comes on. Still, the lights stay steady overhead. Still, someone is sweeping a hallway that may not need sweeping for another hour. That's the part that matters for gentle economics. Because a mall doesn't stop being a mall the moment it stops being popular. It becomes something else, a system operating below its intended capacity, a large machine doing a smaller job. And if you've been there lately, you might recognize the feeling. Not anger, not sadness, just a quiet sense that the building is bigger than the demand being placed on it. So when we say it's not a very good mall right now, we're not blaming anyone. We're simply setting the scene. We're noticing the gap between design and present use, and we're letting that gap tell the story, slowly, gently, without judgment. There's a stage a mall can enter where nothing dramatic happens. No final day, no headline, no sudden emptiness, just a long in-between. Marley Station feels like it's living in that space right now. Still open, not thriving, not closed. And that middle state has its own economics, because a mall doesn't turn off just because fewer people show up. The building still has to be kept at a reasonable temperature. Lights still have to come on. Escalators still need to be safe. Bathrooms still have to be cleaned. Floors still have to be waxed, even if the shine is mostly for the ceiling lights. That's the strange, quiet part of still. The costs don't shrink at the same pace as the crowds. So a mall in the in-between starts to rely on smaller forms of steadiness. A handful of tenants that keep normal hours. A few repeat visitors who come for walking or errands or familiarity. Employees who know which sections stay quiet and which corners still get used. It becomes less like a destination and more like a routine space, a place that remains available even if fewer people are asking for it. And that availability is a kind of promise. Every morning, someone unlocks the doors with the assumption that today could be a normal day. Maybe not a big day, but normal. The music will play, the lights will stay on. A couple stores will open their gates. Someone will throw away yesterday's trash and start again. This is the long in-between, a system continuing without applause. Not collapsing, not recovering, simply operating. And if you listen closely, that's where the story gets interesting. Because the in-between is not nothing. It's labor, it's overhead, it's habit, it's the quiet effort of keeping a large place stable while it waits for the next reason to be full. And in a way, that waiting becomes part of the identity of the mall, a building designed for crowds, learning how to exist with less, still open, not thriving, not closed, just there, holding its shape, one day at a time. To understand Marley Station, it helps to start with the ground it sits on. Glen Burnie is in Anne Arundel County, a place shaped by movement. Not the movement of tourists or big moments, but everyday movement. Commutes, errands, school pickup, the quiet rhythm of people going from one obligation to the next. And right through that rhythm runs Governor Ritchie Highway, Route 2. A long commercial spine where retail has always been built around the simple reality of cars. You pass storefronts the way you pass exits. You decide quickly. You turn in, or you keep going. Marley Station sits right in that flow. Not tucked away, not remote, positioned where people already pass by. And what's important here is that Marley Station wasn't the first mall story in Glen Burnie. Before Marley Station, there was Harrendale Mall. Harrendale opened in 1958, nearby on the same corridor. And for its time, it was a big idea. Often remembered as one of the earliest enclosed air-conditioned shopping malls in the country, especially in this part of the United States. That detail matters because it means this area didn't just follow the mall era. In a quiet way, it helped test it. Harrendale was built for a post-war world that was expanding outward. New housing, more car ownership, more shopping done away from traditional main streets. It offered something that felt modern and comforting. Predictable light, controlled temperature, a contained interior where you could shop without the weather. Then decades later, Herondale reached its ending. It closed in 1997, and after that it was demolished and replaced with a different kind of retail layout. More open, more exposed to the parking lot, more in line with the newer shopping center style. So when we stand at Marley Station today, we're standing near the memory of a full retail cycle that already played out close by. Herondale is the earlier chapter, the first wave of indoor convenience. Marley Station, opening later in 1987, is the next chapter, the bigger second wave enclosed mall, built with the confidence of its era. And Glen Burnie is the thread connecting both, a place where shopping has long been organized around roads and routines, and where the question has always been the same. Can you make it easy for people to stop here? That's what where this mall sits really means. Not just geography, but a location inside a long local habit, one that began before Marley Station and continues softly even now. Glen Burnie sits in a particular kind of in-between. Not the in-between of being forgotten, but the in-between of being close to two large gravity fields at once. Baltimore is nearby. Washington is not that far either. And when you live in the corridor between two major cities, you start to feel how much daily life is shaped by distance and timing. People plan around traffic. They plan around bridges and beltways. They plan around the simple question of how long it takes to get somewhere on a weekday versus a weekend versus a rainy evening when everyone is trying to get home at the same time. In places like this, a lot of the economy is quiet and practical, not glamorous, not symbolic, just people moving through systems that were built for movement. Highways, interchanges, office parks, shopping corridors, neighborhoods with the lights on early in the morning. You don't always visit Baltimore or Washington like a tourist. You orbit them. Maybe you work in one and live closer to the other. Maybe your family is spread out across both. Maybe your errands happen in the space between them. And that creates a certain kind of suburban life, one that values convenience, predictability, and familiarity, not because people are shallow, because time is limited. So places like Marley Station were never meant to be grand monuments. They were meant to be useful. A climate-controlled interior you could reach easily, park easily, walk through without thinking too hard, and leave with what you came for. A place designed to absorb the small needs of a wide region. And when a mall sits between two cities, it also competes with two cities. There are more shopping options, more entertainment options, more restaurants, more reasons to go somewhere else. So the mall becomes something slightly different. Less of a destination on its own, and more of a local convenience node, a familiar stop along the flow, a place you return to not because it's the best, but because it's there, and you already know where everything is. That's what this corridor produces, routines. And Marley Station even now still lives inside that routine economy. It may not feel like a peak-era mall anymore, but it still sits where it always sat, in the path of everyday life, between two large cities, quietly waiting for whoever needs it today. In this region, the car isn't a luxury, it's a tool. It's the way the day stays possible. And once a place is built around driving, everything else starts to arrange itself around the same logic. Distance, timing, convenience, and the small decisions made at speed. You don't just go shopping, you combine it with other movement. You pick up something on the way back from work. You stop after an appointment. You swing by a store because you're already in the area and the parking lot is right there. That's the quiet power of a commuter landscape. People are already moving, already burning time, already watching the clock. So retail becomes something that has to fit into the flow, not interrupt it. This is one reason malls like Marley Station were placed where they were placed, not in the center of a walkable town square, but along the corridor where cars already pass in large numbers every day. The mall isn't only a building, it's also a turn-in, an invitation to pull off the stream of traffic for a while. And in its peak years, the invitation worked well. It offered a predictable interior, the same temperature in every season, the same layout, the same sense that you could park, enter, and let the building carry you. But commuter regions change in a very specific way. As life speeds up, people get less willing to linger anywhere. A commute already takes so much time that shopping begins to feel like something you want to finish quickly. You start choosing stops that require fewer steps, fewer corridors, less wandering, and so the retail landscape shifts, not necessarily because people stop spending, but because they stop wanting the trip to include a long indoor walk. This is where the regional flow becomes visible. Traffic still passes by. Cars still move up and down the corridor. The area is still alive with errands and obligations. But fewer of those trips convert into the slow, drifting kind of mall time. The flow stays strong. The stopping gets weaker. And the mall, built as a machine for stopping, feels that difference. You can sense it in the parking lot, in the entrances that get used more than others, in the way the building holds space that no longer needs to be full in order to stay open. In a car-based region, the economy doesn't disappear. It reroutes. It chooses different shapes. And Marley Station remains what it has always been, a large indoor place positioned inside the current of everyday movement, still trying, quietly, to turn passing traffic into time spent indoors. Marley Station was built in a moment when the suburban future still felt simple. In the 1980s, a lot of planning was based on a steady assumption. More people would move outward, more households would rely on cars, and more daily life would happen along roads like Route 2. Growth didn't just mean more residents, it meant more routines, more commuters passing by the same corridors every day, more families building their weeks around errands, school schedules, weekend shopping, and the quiet need for places that could handle all of it in one stop. A mall made sense inside that confidence, not as a luxury, as infrastructure, a large indoor building that could collect many small needs under one roof: clothes, food, gifts, shoes, haircuts, a quick walk when it's too hot or too cold outside. And in the 1980s, the enclosed mall carried a particular promise: controlled comfort. The weather wouldn't decide your day, the lights would always be on, the music would always be playing, the floors would always be clean enough to walk slowly without thinking about it. For developers and lenders, it was also a clear economic machine. If you could build a mall in the path of growing traffic and anchor it with a few big department stores, you could create a dependable pull. You didn't have to invent a new downtown. You could manufacture a center. That was the confidence of the era, the belief that you could build convenience at scale and people would follow it because it fit the way the region already moved. Marley Station wasn't built to be mysterious. It was built to be obvious. A big legible place where suburban life could land for a few hours and feel organized. And for a while it worked the way it was supposed to. Not as a landmark people traveled to from far away, but as a steady part of local life. A place designed for the middle of the week, not just the weekend. A mall built out of 1980s confidence is, at its core, a bet on normalcy. A bet that tomorrow will look a lot like today, and that enough people will keep driving past, keep turning in, and keep needing a calm indoor place to do ordinary things. Marley Station wasn't built to be a destination in the grand sense. It was built to be convenient, a place that sat in the path of everyday life and offered something simple. You could handle multiple needs in one stop without thinking too hard about it. That was the regional logic. In a corridor where people are constantly moving between neighborhoods, jobs, schools, and errands, convenience becomes its own kind of wealth. Not the flashy kind, the practical kind, the kind that saves you an hour you didn't have. A mall can turn one trip into many. You park once, you step inside once, and within a short walk, you can pick up clothes, grab a bite, exchange a return, browse for a gift, get something small you forgot, and still be back in the car with time left in the day. The mall doesn't require you to stitch together a scattered route across town. It gathers the route for you, and it gathers more than stores. It gathers services, a quick haircut, a phone issue handled at a counter, a last-minute purchase for a birthday or a holiday, a place to walk when the weather outside is too sharp, too wet, too humid, too cold. It's a kind of indoor public space that asks for nothing up front. No appointment, no membership. Just come in, do what you need to do, and leave when you're ready. That's why the mall worked so well as regional convenience. It didn't have to be special. It had to be reliable. And reliability has its own calming effect. Once you've been somewhere a few times, It becomes part of your mental map. You know which entrance you like. You know where the bathrooms are. You know where you tend to park. You know which turns to take without looking at signs. A place you don't have to relearn each time is, quietly, a place that feels easy. And in a commuter region, easy is powerful. Because the harder the rest of your day feels, the more valuable it becomes to have at least one stop that feels familiar and predictable. So Marley Station's original role wasn't to compete with big city shopping districts or become an iconic attraction. Its role was simpler: to be the steady indoor node in the flow, to take the scattered needs of a region and give them one roof, one temperature, one parking lot, one predictable walk. Regional convenience doesn't make headlines, but it builds habits, and habits for a long time are what kept a place like this full. When enclosed malls took off, they weren't sold as replacements for community. They were sold as upgrades to comfort, an indoor version of the old idea of Main Street, but with fewer variables. On a traditional Main Street, shopping depends on weather, parking, distance, and patience. You walk outside, you cross streets, you carry bags in the cold or the heat, you deal with rain, wind, slush, humidity. You search for parking twice. You step in and out of different buildings, each with its own hours, its own lighting, its own mood. A mall promised a smoother experience. One building, one climate, one long interior path. You could park once and then do the rest of your errands without stepping back into the elements. In a place like Glen Burnie, that matters more than it sounds. Because seasons are real, summer can be heavy, winter can be raw, and a wet day can make even a simple errand feel longer than it needs to be. So the mall offered something practical, a controlled interior where you didn't have to negotiate with the sky. The indoor space also offered a certain kind of safety and order. Not perfect safety, just managed space. Clear sightlines, bright lighting, predictable entrances. A sense that someone is responsible for the hallway you're walking down. That feeling for many people is calming, especially for families, especially for older shoppers, especially for anyone who just wants a neutral place to do ordinary things without surprises. And then there's the small luxury of continuity. In a mall, the space between stores is still part of the shopping. You don't leave one store and enter the outside world again. You exit into another interior, a hallway designed to keep you moving gently forward. Benches, planters, music, polished floors. Not because they're beautiful, but because they keep the environment steady. In that sense, the mall wasn't only a marketplace, it was a product itself, the experience of being indoors, the promise of comfort as a setting, a main street without weather, without crossings, without the feeling that you're exposed. So when Marley Station was built, it wasn't just adding square footage. It was offering a certain kind of modern convenience, a place where errands could feel softer, a place where time could stretch out a little, because you weren't rushing back to the car to escape the heat or the cold, an indoor upgrade over the scattered, unpredictable logic of shopping outdoors. And for a long time, that upgrade felt not only appealing, but obvious. A mall like Marley Station wasn't only built to hold stores, it was built to hold a certain kind of atmosphere. And one of the biggest promises of the enclosed mall was simple: the weather would stop mattering. Climate control sounds technical, but what it really creates is emotional comfort. A stable temperature is a quiet kind of relief. It means you don't have to dress for the day quite as carefully. You don't have to rush through errands because the heat is pressing down, or because the cold is sharp, or because the rain is turning the parking lot into a chore. You can arrive, step inside, and feel your body settle. In a region with humid summers, raw winters, and long stretches of wet weather, that stability becomes a feature people notice even if they don't talk about it. It's the difference between going out and getting something done. The mall turns shopping into an indoor task, not an outdoor event. And it changes who can comfortably use the space. For older visitors, climate control can mean less strain. For families, it can mean fewer complaints and fewer interruptions. For anyone who just wants to walk a little, without wind, without glare, without slippery sidewalks, the mall becomes a kind of indoor sidewalk that never closes for weather. So the building sells something before you buy anything. It sells a predictable environment, a calm interior where the air feels the same on a July afternoon and a January morning. That predictability was part of the original economic logic, because comfort keeps people inside longer. And the longer people stay inside, the more likely they are to wander, to browse, to pause, to buy something they didn't plan to buy. Climate control isn't just comfort. It's a system that supports time spent. It's a hidden engine of lingering. And even now, especially now, you can feel how important it still is. Even if fewer people come, the building still has to be kept neutral. Heat, air conditioning, ventilation, still running, still balancing, still doing its invisible work. The mall still maintains a steady indoor world, whether it's full or not. That's the strange beauty of it. A huge interior, continuously moderated, a controlled season, a manufactured calm. And for many years, that calm was not just a background detail. It was part of the reason the mall existed at all. Once you step inside a mall, you're not just entering a building, you're entering a design mood. Climate control is one layer of it, but the mall's comfort is also built through softer tools, light, sound, and small signals that tell your body it can relax. The lighting in a mall is meant to be steady, not dramatic, not intimate, just even enough that you stop thinking about shadows. Bright enough to feel safe, soft enough that you can keep walking without feeling exposed. It's a kind of neutral daylight that doesn't belong to any season or time. Morning, afternoon, and evening all look similar in the corridors. That sameness is part of the point. It keeps your attention on the storefronts, not on the clock. Then there's the music. Mall music is rarely something you would seek out. It's not meant to be listened to closely. It's meant to smooth the space, to fill the quiet edges so the building doesn't feel hollow, to make the gaps between footsteps feel less sharp. And in a mall that isn't crowded, you can hear that purpose more clearly. When the corridors are busy, music blends into the background. When the corridors are calm, the music becomes an active part of the architecture, a gentle layer of sound laid over empty air. The same is true for all the managed comforts that people don't always notice until they're missing. The polished floor that makes walking feel easy, the wide corridors that prevent crowding, the benches placed at just the right distance for resting, the scent, sometimes from a food court, sometimes from a candle shop, sometimes from nothing at all, drifting softly through the same interior air. Even the signs and directories do their work quietly. They reduce uncertainty. They help you feel like you can navigate without stress. And when stress is reduced, time stretches. That's what a mall is engineered to do. Not only to sell things, but to keep you inside long enough for buying to feel natural. In that sense, lighting and music aren't decorative choices. They are behavioral tools. They create a controlled environment where everything feels managed, even when you don't think about what's managing it. A public space that tries to remove friction, no weather, no darkness, no silence, no sharp edges, just a gentle, guided comfort, designed to make wandering feel easy. And in a place like Marley Station today, when some halls are quieter than they once were, you can still feel those systems working. The lights still keep the corridors evenly bright. The music still plays. The building still tries to hold its calm, even when there are fewer people to receive it. One of the most valuable things a mall can offer is not excitement, it's predictability. In a world where the rest of the day can feel uncertain, traffic, schedules, weather, delays, phone calls, errands that take longer than they should, predictability becomes a kind of comfort you can step into. A mall is designed to feel familiar even when you haven't been there in a while. The entrances don't change much. The corridors follow the same logic. The floors and ceilings hold the same quiet shape. Even when stores come and go, the building itself stays legible. You know where you are within a few minutes. And that ease matters, because uncertainty creates friction. It makes people hesitate. It makes them leave sooner. Predictability removes that friction. It lets you move without decision fatigue. Park, enter, walk, browse, leave. The mall is a pattern you can repeat, and repetition is soothing. It's also efficient. You can build your errands around it. You can tell someone, meet me by the entrance, and both of you will understand what that means. You can bring kids or parents or grandparents, and the environment doesn't surprise anyone. No sudden weather, no unexpected street crossings, no confusing layout of scattered storefronts. Just a contained interior that behaves the way it behaved last time. Even the rules are predictable. The mall has regular hours, it has posted signs, it has a clear boundary between inside and outside. There's a quiet sense that the space is being watched and maintained, whether or not you notice the watching. For many people, that predictability is what made malls feel safe. Not perfect, just stable. A place where you could wander without needing a plan. A place where killing time didn't require effort. And now, in the long in-between, predictability becomes even more noticeable. Because when crowds thin out, the building's consistency remains. The same lights, the same music, the same temperature, the same long hallways, the same feeling that the place is prepared for more people than are currently there. So the mall becomes a kind of quiet container for routine, a space that keeps offering the same experience, day after day, whether or not demand fully shows up to meet it. Predictability is not a flaw. It was one of the main products the mall sold. And in a region built around commuting and schedules, it's easy to see why that product mattered. Because when the outside world feels fast and changeable, a place that stays the same can feel like relief. A steady interior, a repeated pattern, a calm environment where nothing asks too much of you. Just walk, just look, just be inside for a while. At its peak, Marley Station didn't need to be famous. It didn't need to be a tourist stop or a regional landmark people bragged about visiting. It just needed to be busy. And busy in a mall like this is a very specific kind of success. Not a grand event, not a constant rush. More like a steady hum, a predictable flow of people arriving in waves, after school, after work, on weekends during the holiday stretch, when the calendar quietly demands more buying than anyone really wants. The mall's peak years were not a story of spectacle. They were a story of normal life working as intended. Cars in the lot, footsteps in the corridors, families moving in small clusters, teenagers drifting without urgency, employees who knew the day by its rhythm, not by its surprises. It was busy enough that you felt you were in a shared place, busy enough that you could pause near a storefront without feeling like you were the only one standing still, busy enough that the food court sounded like conversation instead of echo. But it wasn't iconic. It wasn't the kind of mall that became a myth. It didn't need special architecture or rare stores. Its strength was that it fit into the region like a practical tool, a place that caught the everyday overflow of suburban life. If you lived nearby, you didn't go because it was extraordinary. You went because it was there, and it worked. That kind of success is easy to overlook because it doesn't announce itself. It looks like ordinary errands. It looks like a normal Saturday. It looks like people carrying bags without thinking about the fact that they're part of an economic system. And that's what makes it valuable for this story. Because the peak wasn't a golden age. It was simply the mall doing the job it was built to do, reliably, repeatedly, without drama. A steady interior routine. A familiar, busy place that didn't have to be special to be full. In the peak years, Marley Station didn't need you to arrive with a plan. It worked best when you had a few small needs and a little time, a return to make, a birthday coming up, a pair of shoes that finally wore out, a quick stop that turned into an hour simply because the building made it easy to keep walking. That's what normal success looked like here. The mall as a convenient loop. You could start with something practical, a pharmacy-style errand, a small household purchase, a quick look for socks or a belt, and then drift into browsing without noticing the transition. Because in a mall, browsing is built into the path. Even if you came for one thing, you were quietly offered many other things on the way. And the stores that people remember from that era are the kinds of places that supported ordinary routines. A shoe store like Tom McCann, a bookstore like Walden Books or B. Dalton, where you could stand and read a few pages without anyone hurrying you along. A music store like Sam Goody, where browsing could take longer than buying. A toy store like KB Toys, which could turn a practical trip into a negotiation with a kid. A jewelry store like K, sitting under bright light, offering small, expensive objects that felt serious in a casual hallway. A place like Radio Shack, built for little technical problems and small solutions. Clothing stores that served different ages and moods, including teen shops like Chess King. The kind of storefront that made fashion feel like a changing weekly weather. And then there was food. Not dining him exactly, more like fuel and treats. The mall food court in the busy years wasn't quiet. It was a pause filled with movement. Trays, napkins, conversations, the constant soft scrape of chairs. People remember places like Boardwalk Fries, simple and salty and reliable. They remember chain comfort stops like Arby's. They remember sweets, cinnamon, frosting, the smell of warm dough. The kind of thing you didn't plan to buy, but somehow ended up holding. And in the background, there was entertainment that anchored the whole visit. A movie theater inside the same system, turning shopping into an evening without requiring another drive. That mattered in a commuter region, because the best trips were the ones that stayed contained. Park once, do a few errands, eat something, browse a little longer than you expected, maybe see a movie, then walk back out into the parking lot, carrying bags that made the time feel justified. This is what the mall did well at its peak. It made ordinary life feel organized. It turned a scattered list of needs into one interior walk. Not iconic, not dramatic, just busy in the most normal way. The steady rhythm of errands, food, and browsing, moving through a familiar building that always felt ready for the next person to come in. For most people, Marley Station was never a special trip. It was a habit, a place you folded into the week the way you fold in groceries, laundry, and appointments. You went because it was convenient, because it was familiar, because you didn't have to think too hard once you arrived. In that way, the mall was less like an event and more like a tool, a reliable interior loop you could use for ordinary life. It became part of people's personal maps. You knew which entrance you liked. You knew where you tended to park. You knew the shortcut corridor that saved a few steps. You knew where the bathrooms were without looking for signs. You knew which benches were near the stores you always checked. That kind of knowledge builds quietly over time. And once it's built, it turns a place into something comfortable. It lowers the effort required to be there. It makes the mall feel easy. This is different from a destination mall, where the visit is the point. A destination asks you to travel farther, stay longer, make a day of it. But a habit mall fits into the spaces between things. It lives between work and home, between school pickup and dinner, between I need one thing and I'm already here. It serves people who don't want to be impressed. They want to be finished. And then, without noticing, they browse. They wander into one extra store. They get something to eat. They walk a little longer because the air is comfortable and the floor is smooth. Habits create their own quiet loyalty. Not the loyalty of brand devotion, but the loyalty of familiarity. People return not because it's the best option, but because it's the option they already understand. And when a place runs on habit, it doesn't always feel exciting even at its busiest. It feels normal. It feels like the building is doing what it's supposed to do. And that normalcy is its own kind of success. Because the mall was never only selling products. It was selling a repeatable experience, a steady indoor rhythm, a predictable environment where daily life could pass through without friction. So in the peak years, Marley Station didn't have to compete for attention the way a destination does. It simply had to remain present in people's routines. And for a long time it did. The mall as habit is a quiet idea, but it explains a lot. Because when the mall is woven into everyday life, it doesn't need to be extraordinary to stay full. It only needs to be there, ready, familiar, and easy to return to. In a traditional enclosed mall, the most important stores were not always the most exciting ones. They were the anchors, the big department stores at the edges of the building, placed like weights at the ends of a hallway. Their job wasn't only to sell things. Their job was to pull people through the mall. That's why they're called anchors. They created gravity. If you needed school clothes, a winter coat, a gift for a parent, new towels, a perfume, a suit, a set of dishes, department stores were designed to be the one-stop solution. They had range. They had familiarity. They had the feeling of being dependable, even if you didn't love shopping. So people would make a trip for the anchor. And then, once they were inside, they would pass other storefronts on the way. That walk is the mall's hidden engine. A person comes in for something practical at one end, and the building quietly turns that trip into exposure. Shoes, jewelry, snacks, books, shirts on sale, a quick glance that becomes a purchase. Department stores didn't just bring customers, they distributed customers, and the mall's layout was built around that distribution. Long corridors between anchors weren't wasted space. They were the marketplace itself, the space where the smaller stores lived, the space where browsing happened without needing to be planned. In that structure, the anchor stores weren't simply tenants. They were the reason the rest of the tenants could exist at all. They made the mall feel legitimate. They made it feel complete. They made the parking lot look full. They gave people a reason to say, let's just go to the mall, because the mall included something that covered the basics. So when we talk about Marley Station's original economic logic, we have to talk about anchors as traffic engines. A mall is not a collection of equal parts. It's a system with a few heavy pieces that create motion. And when those heavy pieces are strong, the whole building feels alive. When they weaken, the effect isn't immediate like a sudden closure. It's slower than that. The gravity fades. The walk gets shorter. The corridors get quieter. And the smaller stores, built to live off passing footsteps, start to feel the difference first. Small stores didn't come to a mall because the mall itself was magical. They came because the mall promised footsteps, and the anchors were the reason those footsteps were predictable. A small store can't usually afford to create demand on its own. It can't spend millions on advertising. It can't build a huge parking lot and pull people from miles away. But it can survive, sometimes thrive, if it's placed in a steady stream of people who are already there for something else. That's what the mall offered, and that's what the anchors generated. When a department store is strong, it becomes a dependable reason for a trip. People come for coats, shoes, gifts, returns, seasonal sales. They come with purpose. Then they walk. And the walk is where small stores live. Small stores don't need everyone. They need enough people passing by, enough glances, enough moments where someone says, "Oh, I forgot I needed that." Or, "Let's just take a look." That's why mall storefronts are built like little stages. Bright window displays, clear signs, a quick promise you can understand in 2 seconds of walking. Because the mall is a moving audience. The stores aren't only competing with other stores, they're competing with the person's momentum. A good storefront catches a person mid-stride. And in the peak years, the mall had plenty of mid-stride moments to offer. Anchors created the flow, but the mall refined it. The layout guided people past rows of smaller shops. The corridors were long enough to expose you to variety. The escalators and entrances positioned you so you'd naturally pass certain storefronts without trying. Even if you only came for one thing, the building quietly gave your attention to many things. This is why small stores followed anchors. Not because they needed the department store brand next door, but because they needed the traffic pattern the anchors created. If the anchor is a magnet, the small stores are the iron filings. They arrange themselves around the pull, and once they're arranged, they create a second layer of value. Because the more stores you have, the more reasons there are to come. A mall gets stronger as a system when the mix feels complete. Shoes, snacks, jewelry, books, a quick gift, a small treat, a new shirt, a repair kiosk, a phone accessory. Each one is small, but together they make the building feel useful. So the small stores weren't just extras, they were the texture of the mall. The things you discovered while walking to something else. The purchases you didn't plan, the little reasons the trip felt worth it. And all of it depended on one quiet foundation: people coming in for the anchors, and then moving through the corridors. When an anchor store weakens, the mall doesn't collapse in one loud moment. It changes in small, structural ways. Because the anchor's true job isn't only to sell, it's to generate reasons. Reasons to come, reasons to park, reasons to walk the long corridor instead of stopping at a smaller store somewhere else and going straight back to the car. So when an anchor weakens, fewer shoppers, less selection, shorter hours, less energy, the mall's flow begins to thin. Not everywhere at once, but in patterns. The first thing that changes is distance. People still come, but they don't walk as far. They enter, do the one thing they plan to do, and leave. The slow drift becomes a shorter loop, and the corridors that depend on that drift begin to feel quieter. Then the small stores feel it, because small stores live on passing traffic. They live on impulse, on the glance that turns into curiosity, on the "since we're here" purchase. When fewer people pass by, the store can still be open and still be good. But the math gets harder. Sales soften, staffing shrinks, inventory becomes more cautious, and the store starts operating in a tighter, more careful mode. Eventually, the mall's mix changes too. Shorter leases, temporary tenants, more service storefronts that don't require heavy browsing traffic, a few shops that are stable because they meet a specific need, and a few spaces that remain dark because the system can't justify filling them yet. This is one reason malls can feel uneven in the long in-between. Some corridors still have activity. Other corridors feel like they're waiting. Not abandoned, just underused. And once the anchors weaken, maintenance becomes a different kind of burden. Because the building was designed for high volume, for crowds, for long days, for constant movement. When volume drops, the building doesn't shrink with it. The lights still need to come on. The air still needs to be managed. The escalators still need to be safe. The hallways still need to be clean. So the mall begins spending money to maintain space that is no longer producing the same return. That's the hidden cost of scale. Big systems are efficient when they are full. They are expensive when they are half full. And as anchors weaken, the mall's identity shifts. It stops feeling like a place that pulls you in. It starts feeling like a place you pass through, or a place you use for one specific reason. The gravity fades. The mall becomes lighter, not because the building changes, but because the force that once drew people across it becomes less reliable. And yet, nothing ends right away. That's what makes this stage so quiet. A weakened anchor doesn't always mean a closed mall. It often means a mall continuing with less pull. A system still running, but with less momentum. The same structure, learning to function on fewer footsteps. In the morning, before the mall feels like retail, it can feel like something else. A long indoor hallway with steady air. A place where the day begins softly. Mall walkers tend to arrive early, when the parking lot is still mostly empty, and the entrances feel quiet and wide. Some come alone, some come in pairs. Sometimes a small familiar group forms without needing to be organized. The pace is unhurried, not exercise in the intense sense, more like movement as maintenance. A gentle loop, a few laps to keep the joints loose, to keep the lungs awake, to keep the day from starting too stiff. There's something practical about it. It's warm in winter, cool in summer, dry when it's raining. The floor is level, the lighting is steady. There are benches if you need them. And there's a feeling, subtle but real, that the space is safe enough to walk without watching every step. This is one of the quiet roles a mall can play as it ages. Even if shopping slows down, the building can still serve as a kind of indoor street, a place where people can move through space without needing to buy anything, and without needing an invitation. In the morning, you can sometimes hear the sounds more clearly, the soft squeak of shoes on polished floor, a distant cart rolling, a gate being lifted somewhere far down the hall, the hum of ventilation overhead. The mall is awake, but not busy, and the walkers move through it like the first gentle current of the day. They know the loops, they know the shortcuts, they know which doors are open earliest. Some of them probably walked here years ago when the mall was busier, back when the corridors filled up later in the day. Now they're here for a different reason, not to shop, to keep a routine, to borrow the mall's stable environment for a little while. And there's something quietly fitting about that, because in a place built to manage comfort, morning walking becomes a kind of natural use. The mall, even in its long in-between, still provides what it always provided: a controlled interior, a predictable path, a calm place to move. And for the people walking those corridors in the early hours, that's enough. They don't need the mall to be thriving. They just need it to be open. They just need the lights on, the air steady, and the hallway long enough to make another lap. On many days, the people who truly inhabit the mall are not the shoppers. They're the employees. They arrive on schedules. They unlock gates. They turn on lights behind counters. They sweep, stock, straighten, and reset the same small zones of space, day after day, whether the crowds arrive or not. In the peak years, employees were part of the background. There were so many shoppers that no single worker felt like the center of the building. But in the long in-between, the balance changes. The mall can feel like it's being carried by the people who work there. They become the steady population, the consistent presence. You see it in the way the day starts. A worker walking with purpose down a corridor that's still quiet. A key turning in a lock. A metal gate rolling upward. A sign flipped to open. A register tested. A display adjusted by a few inches. The small motions that make retail look effortless to everyone who arrives later. Employees also learn the mall differently than customers do. Shoppers know the mall by storefronts. Employees know it by systems, which doors stick when it's cold, which hallway stays quiet, where the air feels warmer, which lights flicker, which escalator sounds a little tired, where the maintenance staff tends to show up, where security makes its loops. They know the building as a living routine, and they know time in a way shoppers don't. They can feel the slow hours. They can feel the brief bursts. They can tell by the sound of footsteps and the shape of the corridor, whether it's going to be a busy day or a thin one. When a mall is thriving, this knowledge is still there, but it's less visible. When a mall is quieter, the employees become the main rhythm section. They are the ones creating motion. They are the ones keeping the environment normal. Because normal in a mall doesn't happen automatically. It's produced. It's produced by someone vacuuming a carpet that will only see a few shoes, by someone wiping a counter that might not get used for an hour, by someone standing ready, smiling, present, just in case. There's also a kind of patience built into that work, the patience of staying open, the patience of being ready for business even when business is uncertain. The mall may feel like a public space, but it runs on private effort, on schedules, on paychecks, on workers keeping their focus in a place that can sometimes feel slow. So when we talk about daily life inside the mall, it's worth remembering. For many hours of the day, the mall belongs most to the people who work there. They are the ones who know its quiet corners. They are the ones who hear its echoes. They are the ones who keep the lights steady and the doors functional. And in the long in-between, they are often the clearest sign that the system is still operating. Not thriving, not closed, still working. Not everyone who comes to the mall comes to shop. Some people come because the building is familiar, because it's part of their mental map, because in a busy world, it's calming to walk through a place you already understand. These repeat visitors move differently than first-time shoppers. They don't stop to read directories. They don't hesitate at intersections. They turn corners without thinking. They know which escalator leads where. They know where the quiet bathrooms are. They know which entrance feels easiest on the legs and which hallway has the longest straight stretch for walking. They know the mall the way you know a neighborhood, by habit, by repetition, by memory stored in the body. Sometimes they come for one specific errand, the same one every time. A quick pickup, a service counter, a familiar store that still does what it always did. But often, the errand is only half the reason. The other half is simply being inside. Being somewhere warm in winter, cool in summer, dry when the weather is unpleasant. Somewhere you can move at your own speed without needing a reservation, without needing a plan. In that sense, the mall becomes a kind of indoor commons. Not loud, not celebratory, just available. A repeat visitor might look like someone killing time, but it's usually something gentler than that. They are keeping a routine. They are returning to a space that has stayed mostly the same while other parts of life have changed. And in a mall that's quieter now, these visitors become more noticeable. Not because they stand out, but because there are fewer people overall. You begin to recognize patterns. The same face at the same hour. The same slow loop. The same pause at the same bench. A small, steady population using the building as a predictable container for part of the day. There's comfort in that predictability. If you know the layout by heart, you don't have to think much. Your mind can drift. Your attention can soften. You can walk and let the mall hold you the way a familiar song holds you, quietly, without demanding anything back. And this is one of the understated truths of places like Marley Station. Even in the long in-between, the building still offers something valuable. A stable interior routine. A place where you can return and recognize the world, even if it's a little emptier than it used to be. For repeat visitors, that emptiness is not always a problem. Sometimes it's the point. More space, less noise, fewer interruptions. Just a long, familiar hallway, waiting for another slow lap, one turn after another, like a calm loop through memory. A mall looks calm on the surface, but underneath that calm is constant work. The comfort of the building isn't a natural state. It's maintained. And the systems that maintain it never really stop. Start with the air, heating, cooling, ventilation, the steady management of temperature and humidity that makes the interior feel neutral. Not too hot, not too cold, not too damp, not too dry. Most people don't notice HVAC when it's working well. They only notice it when it fails. But when it's working, it's always there in the background. A soft hum, a gentle airflow, an invisible balancing act happening above the ceiling tiles and behind locked doors. Then there's the light. Mall lighting is designed to feel effortless. Steady brightness, no drama, no shadows strong enough to interrupt the mood. But keeping that steadiness takes attention. Bulbs burn out, ballasts fail, fixtures flicker. Some lights have to be replaced after hours, with ladders and carts and careful timing, so the hallway can look normal again the next day. And then there are escalators. Escalators are one of the mall's quiet promises. Movement without effort. They make the building feel smooth. They keep people flowing. They make a large space feel manageable. But escalators are machines. They wear down. They require inspection, cleaning, repair, replacement of parts most people never think about. And when an escalator is off, the mall feels different. The building feels heavier. The walk becomes more physical. The flow changes. What's striking, especially in the long in-between, is that these systems still have to run even when the mall is less busy. The air still needs to be controlled. The lights still need to stay on. The escalators still need to be safe. The building doesn't get to half operate. It either holds the atmosphere or it doesn't. So maintenance becomes a kind of quiet devotion, a steady expense, a steady schedule, a set of tasks that continue regardless of how many people are present to appreciate them. And this is where the economics become visible if you look gently. A mall isn't only a collection of leases. It's a living, mechanical environment, a place where comfort is produced every day by electricity, equipment, and labor. And even when the corridors are quiet, that work continues, keeping the air steady, the light even, the movement smooth, so the building can remain what it was designed to be. A calm interior world that feels effortless, because someone is always making sure it is. One of the quietest kinds of work in a mall is cleaning. Not the dramatic kind, not the emergency kind, just the steady, ordinary work of keeping a large interior neutral. When a mall is busy, cleaning is invisible because it's constant. There's always a reason, always a spill, always footprints, always trash, always a bathroom that needs attention. But in a quieter mall, something changes. The work continues, even when the evidence of use is lighter. Hallways still get swept. Corners still get checked. Trash cans still get emptied. Restrooms still get cleaned on schedule, even if only a few people use them since the last time. Floors still get mopped. Carpets still get vacuumed. Glass still gets wiped. And some of these spaces are places most shoppers barely notice. Back corridors, side entrances, empty seating areas. The far end of a wing where only a couple storefronts are open. A bench that hasn't been sat on today, but still gets dusted around. Cleaning in those areas can feel almost ceremonial. Not because anyone is pretending, because the building has to remain ready. A mall can't look half open without changing how it feels. If a section looks neglected, the mood spreads. People assume the whole place is sliding, so the cleaning staff does something quiet and important. They keep the atmosphere stable. They erase the signs of emptiness. They keep the place from feeling abandoned, even when it's underused. There's also a practical reason. A mall is a public interior. If it's open, it has to meet a certain standard. The bathrooms have to be usable. The floors have to be safe. The entrances can't collect grime. The handrails can't feel sticky. The spaces have to remain clean enough that nobody thinks twice about being there. So the work continues in the spaces that don't get seen much. And that's part of what makes it invisible. Because the best cleaning work is the kind that leaves no story behind. No evidence, no attention, just the feeling that the building is maintained, that the system is still functioning. In the long in-between, cleaning becomes one of the clearest examples of how a mall keeps paying to stay neutral. Even with fewer people, even with long stretches of quiet, someone is still walking the corridors with a cart. Someone is still wiping surfaces. Someone is still taking out trash. Not because it's glamorous, because the building is open. And being open has requirements, so the mall stays clean, even in the areas where footsteps are rare, even in the spaces that feel larger than they need to be, even in the quiet corners that, for now, are mostly waiting. A mall is not only a place where money is made, it's also a place where money is spent, quietly, continuously, just to keep the building feeling normal. That's what neutral really means here. Neutral temperature, neutral lighting, neutral cleanliness, neutral safety. A background calm that seems effortless but is actually purchased every day. Electricity is part of it. So much electricity that you stop thinking about it. Lights, ventilation, escalators, signs, security systems, emergency lighting, quiet machines humming behind walls. Then there's water, heat, cooling, supplies, repairs, replacement parts, the constant small upkeep that keeps a large interior from drifting into neglect. And then, of course, the labor. People showing up on schedules to make sure the building stays stable, to remove trash before it becomes noticeable, to replace a flickering light before it changes the mood, to fix a door before it turns into a problem, to mop a floor even if only a few shoes crossed it. When a mall is thriving, these costs feel like the price of doing business. They're supported by busy storefronts, steady sales, long hours and full corridors. But in the long in-between, something becomes clearer. The building still requires nearly the same level of neutrality, even when the demand inside it is smaller. A mall can't easily scale down its atmosphere. It can't choose to be half-lit. It can't choose to be half-conditioned. It can't choose to clean only the popular sections and ignore the rest without changing how the whole place feels. So the system keeps paying. It pays to hold the interior together. It pays to keep the experience consistent. It pays to make the building feel calm, safe, and usable, even when the hallways are quieter than they were designed to be. This is one of the hidden economics of large spaces. A big building is efficient when it's full. It's expensive when it's underused, because the baseline costs don't drop as fast as the crowds. And yet, the mall keeps doing it. Day after day, it keeps buying neutrality. It keeps maintaining the calm. It keeps funding the simple promise that, if you walk through the doors, the space will feel steady. That's the long in-between made visible. A system still operating. A building still held in place. A large interior kept neutral. Not because it's thriving, but because it is open. And being open is an ongoing commitment. Shopping habits didn't change because people suddenly became different. They changed because time changed. Online retail didn't just offer new products. It offered a new rhythm. It made shopping smaller, faster, more compressed. In the older mall rhythm, shopping often meant a trip, a drive, a parking space, a walk through corridors, the gentle drift past storefronts. You didn't only buy the item, you spent time inside the environment where buying happened. And time in a mall could stretch without you noticing. You might come in for one thing and leave with three. You might browse just because you were already there. You might stop for food because it was easy. Online shopping tightened that whole experience. It turned "I need something" into a few minutes. No drive, no wandering, no weather, no operating hours. Just a search bar, a comparison, a click. And once that becomes normal, it changes how people value the rest of the shopping trip. Because the mall isn't only competing with other stores, it's competing with the idea of not going anywhere at all. Time compression is the key. People didn't stop wanting things. They stopped wanting shopping to take up a whole afternoon. The mall's value used to include the walk, the browsing, the unplanned discoveries. But when time gets tighter, work schedules, commutes, responsibilities, those extra minutes feel more expensive. So the shopping list gets handled differently. You buy with intention, you buy with speed, you buy from home. And the mall begins to lose something subtle, the reason to linger, The mall was built for lingering, for slow movement, for being inside longer than necessary. Online retail removed necessary from the equation. It made the transaction efficient. And when transactions become efficient, the spaces designed for inefficiency, designed for wandering, start to feel oversized. This is structural change, not moral change. It's not a story of laziness or impatience. It's a story of friction disappearing, a system that used to require travel and time suddenly requiring almost none. And once a region adapts to that, it doesn't fully go back. So Marley Station, like many malls, begins living in a world where the old rhythm still exists, but it's no longer the default. Some people still come for browsing. Some people still come for food. Some people still come because it's familiar. But the everyday shopping trip, the one built into the week, becomes more optional. And when something becomes optional, it changes the whole pattern of traffic. Not suddenly, quietly. The flow still passes by on the highway, but fewer trips convert into long indoor walks. Time gets compressed, and the mall, built to hold time, begins to feel that difference in its air. A mall is designed for lingering. It's built on the assumption that once you're inside, you will stay a little longer than you planned. You'll wander, you'll browse, you'll pause, you'll look at things you didn't come for. Lingering is not an accident in a mall. It's part of the architecture. Long corridors, benches, music that smooths the air, comfortable temperature, a food court that offers a reason to sit. The mall gives you permission to take your time. But when shopping habits shift, that permission becomes less valuable. Not because people don't like comfort, because they don't always have the spare minutes. If you can buy something quickly online, then the only reason to go out is the reason you can't click. A return you need to handle in person, a service that requires a counter, a specific item you want today, not in 3 days, a place to walk indoors, a quick meal. The mall becomes less of an all-purpose day out and more of a targeted stop. And once trips become targeted, the walking gets shorter. The corridors become more transitional than leisurely. People enter, do the one thing, and head back out to the parking lot. The mall still exists, but the time people spend inside it narrows. This is also about attention. Online shopping trains attention to move quickly. Search, choose, purchase, done. It reduces the number of surprises. And browsing is built on surprise. Browsing asks you to be open to what you didn't plan. It asks you to let your attention drift. When the culture around buying becomes more efficient, drifting starts to feel like wasted motion, even if it's pleasant, even if it's calming. So a mall like Marley Station begins to feel different, not because it's bad, but because the average visit is shorter. Fewer people are there just to be there. Fewer people are strolling with no goal. Fewer people are killing time. And without those extra minutes, the mall's atmosphere changes. A building designed for long, unhurried wandering begins to hold more empty air. You can feel it in the way sound travels, in the way a person's footsteps become a major part of the hallway, in the way the food court looks like it's waiting for a crowd that doesn't arrive all at once anymore. This is not blame. It's a quiet shift in what people need. Time becomes tighter. Trips become purposeful. And the mall, built for lingering, becomes a place where lingering happens less often. Not because it isn't allowed, but because fewer people have a reason to do it. The building still offers the same comfort, but the modern routine asks for less time inside it. And over years, that difference adds up. Big economic shifts don't always arrive with a loud announcement. Sometimes they arrive as a series of small choices that feel reasonable in the moment. One less trip, one more delivery, one quick pickup instead of a long walk. Convenience doesn't need to argue. It doesn't need to persuade you with a speech. It simply shows up, makes life slightly easier, and becomes the new default. That's how it wins. In the mall era, convenience meant one roof, park once, do many things, stay comfortable, leave with a handful of needs handled. It was a strong kind of convenience for its time. But the definition of convenience changed. Convenience became shorter, more direct, less movement, fewer steps between the desire and the purchase. And once people get used to that, the mall's kind of convenience starts to feel slower. Not wrong, just slower. because an enclosed mall contains distance by design. You have to walk through it. You have to pass storefronts. You have to move from one zone to another. That's part of the experience and part of the old business model. But when convenience becomes a priority, distance becomes a cost. Even a pleasant indoor walk can start to feel like extra time. So the shopping center that lets you park near the exact door you need starts to look appealing. The store with curbside pickup starts to feel efficient. The delivery option starts to feel like relief. And the mall's gentle wandering becomes more optional. Convenience also wins quietly because it doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like an improvement. You don't think, I'm changing the economy. You think, I don't have time today. Or, I'll just order it. Or, I'll pick it up on the way. And those choices, repeated across a region for years, reshape what kinds of places thrive. A mall depends on time spent inside, on browsing, on the unplanned purchase, on the soft drift. But convenience pulls in the opposite direction. It reduces drift, it compresses the trip, it narrows the visit to a single task, and over time, that changes the atmosphere of a mall, like Marley Station. Not in one dramatic scene, just slowly. A little less foot traffic each year, a little less reason to wander, a little more space that feels like it was built for a larger moment. This is why convenience feels so powerful in the long run, because it doesn't need you to love it, it just needs you to choose it. And when enough people do, often without thinking much about it, the result is a new normal, a new rhythm of shopping, a new shape of retail, and a mall that keeps operating, still open, still maintained, while the world outside gets faster and more direct. Convenience quietly wins, not because anyone failed, because convenience is one of the strongest forces in modern life, and it rarely announces itself as a force at all. As of now, late 2025 into early 2026, the first thing you notice inside Marley Station is the contrast. A few places are still operating with their lights on and their hours posted like normal. You can still do real errands here. You can still walk in, buy something, talk to a cashier, hear the routine sounds of a place that's open. But most of the storefronts are dark, not closed forever in a dramatic sense, just shut gates, empty interiors, papered windows, the quiet look of space that isn't currently in use. Long stretches of corridor where the mall feels larger than the number of active stores would suggest. This is what partial occupancy looks like in real life. The building's still functioning, but the energy concentrated into pockets. A few anchors and large tenants can still hold steady. Places like the department stores, the gym, the movie theater, because they have a specific reason people show up. They don't rely on wandering as much. The smaller inline storefronts are where the difference becomes visible. When those stores are open, a mall feels like a continuous strip of choices. When they're mostly dark, the mall starts to feel like a set of islands. Open spaces separated by quiet. You can walk past 5 or 10 closed gates in a row and then suddenly reach a lit storefront where someone is working, music is playing, and the normal retail posture returns for a moment. And that pattern changes how you move. You stop browsing without even deciding to. You start walking with more purpose because there are fewer distractions pulling you sideways. You become aware of distance, how long the hallway is, how far sound travels, how much of the building is being kept alive even when it isn't being fully used. This is the visual shift of the long in-between. Not thriving, not closed, just open, while a lot of the interior waits in the dark. When a mall moves into partial occupancy, the tenant mix starts to change in a quiet, practical way. Long-term, high-confidence leases become harder to secure. Not because nobody has ideas, but because fewer businesses want to commit to a large, fixed monthly cost inside a building where traffic is less predictable. So the mall begins to fill space differently. This is where temporary tenants come in, pop-up shops, short-term kiosks, seasonal operators, small businesses trying a storefront for a few months rather than a few years. Sometimes it's a local seller testing whether in-person retail still works for their product. Sometimes it's a service business that benefits from visibility but doesn't need heavy daily crowds. Sometimes it's a holiday-based tenant that appears when demand is highest, then disappears when the season passes. Short leases keep the system flexible. They allow management to say yes more easily. They lower the risk for the tenant, and they allow the building to keep more lights on, at least in pockets, so the mall still feels occupied in places. But the trade-off is stability. When leases are short, continuity becomes fragile. A storefront can be active for a while and then go quiet again. A kiosk can appear, do business for a month, and vanish. The mall becomes less like a permanent lineup and more like a rotating cast. And that rotation changes the feeling of the space. In a thriving mall, the stores feel like fixtures. You return expecting the same names. You build habits around them. In a mall running on shorter commitments, you learn not to assume. A place you noticed last month may be gone. A new sign may appear where a familiar one used to be. And the corridor begins to carry that sense of uncertainty, quietly without drama. There's also a deeper economic reason this happens. Short leases are a response to time. They match the way modern business has become more cautious, more experimental, less willing to bet years of rent on a single location, especially when so much buying happens elsewhere now. So temporary tenants aren't a sign that the mall is dead. They're a sign that the mall is adapting, trying to keep activity present, trying to keep the building from feeling entirely dark, trying to turn a large, fixed space into something more flexible. In the long in between, short leases become a kind of bridge. They don't restore the old mall era. They don't replace the anchors, but they keep small pieces of commerce moving through the corridors, briefly, quietly, like little pulses of life inside a much larger structure. A few lights on, a few new signs, a few months of activity, and then perhaps a new tenant or another stretch of waiting. A mall doesn't actually grow. The corridors stay the same length. The ceilings stay the same height. The benches stay where they have always been. But when fewer storefronts are lit and fewer people are moving through, the space begins to feel larger. Not larger in a proud way, larger in a quiet, slightly unreal way. Like a room that was designed for a party that never quite arrives. In the peak years, the mall felt scaled to the crowd. Noise and movement filled in the emptiness. Storefronts were bright. There were enough people that you rarely saw a corridor all the way to the end without someone crossing your view. The building felt appropriately sized. Now, with partial occupancy, the mall's original scale becomes more noticeable. The hallways feel longer because you walk farther without interruption. The sightlines feel wider because there are fewer visual stops along the way. A dark storefront doesn't pull your attention the way a bright window display does, so your eyes travel past it without landing. And when your eyes don't land, distance expands. Sound changes too. In a full mall, sound gets absorbed by people. Conversations, footsteps, shopping bags, food court noise, the messy texture of a busy day. In a quieter mall, sound has room. Footsteps echo a little longer. Music floats farther. A rolling cart becomes a small event. Even your own movement can feel louder than you expect. Air feels different in large underused spaces. Not physically different necessarily, still controlled, still managed, but perceptually different. There's more stillness, more space between moments, more quiet. And with that comes a strange kind of clarity. You begin to notice the architecture as architecture, the width of corridors, the height of ceilings, the way lights repeat in patterns overhead, the way the building was designed to guide crowds that are no longer required for it to function. This is one of the subtle signatures of the long in-between. A place built for volume becomes a place that contains emptiness gracefully, not abandoned, not ruined, just larger than it used to feel. And that feeling, the space stretching out around you, is not only a mood, it's information. It tells you gently that the building's capacity is bigger than the demand being placed on it. The mall is still open, still maintained, still lit in sections, but the space without its former density reveals itself more honestly. A large interior designed for many, now holding fewer, and, in the quiet, feeling bigger than ever. In a busy mall, footsteps disappear into the crowd. They get absorbed by conversation, music, shopping bags, and the constant movement of other people. But in a quieter mall, footsteps become part of the soundscape. You hear your own steps more clearly. You hear other people before you see them. A person walking a corridor can be heard from far away, not because they're loud, but because the space has room to carry sound. The floor becomes an instrument. Tile, polished concrete, hard surfaces designed for durability. Surfaces that reflect sound instead of swallowing it. So a simple walk turns into a gentle echo. Step, 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 and then a pause. And then the sound returns again as someone else crosses a hallway, or a cart rolls in the distance, or a door opens and closes with a soft, hollow emphasis. Footsteps traveling farther is one of the clearest signs of empty space. Not empty as in abandoned. Empty as in underfilled. The same square footage, the same architecture, but fewer bodies to soften it, and it changes the way you move. People tend to walk a little more carefully in quiet places, not out of fear, out of awareness. When the sound of your movement travels, you become more conscious of it. You naturally slow down. You take smaller pauses. You stop to let someone pass. The mall begins to feel less like a crowd space and more like a library hallway. Public, open, but lightly occupied. This is where the mall's calm can become almost meditative. The echo doesn't feel harsh if the building is well maintained. It feels smooth, like a gentle reminder of scale, like the building quietly letting you know how much space it holds. And in a sleep documentary, this is one of the most peaceful details, because footsteps are ordinary. They don't demand attention. They simply mark time. In a quiet mall, each step is a small sound traveling through a large interior, a soft rhythm, a slow metronome, a reminder that the building is still there, still open, still holding its shape, even when there's room for every sound to go a little farther than it used to. Mall music is not meant to be the main event. It isn't there to make you sing along. It's there to smooth the space. In the busy years, music had competition. It blended into the background behind conversation, footsteps, laughter, food court noise, and the steady friction of a crowd moving through a building. You could hear it, but you didn't notice it. It was just part of the air. But in the long in-between, the music has a different job. Now it fills gaps. It reaches into quiet corridors and tries to make them feel less empty. It drifts across closed storefronts. It sits in the space where crowds used to be. And because there's less noise overall, you can hear the music more clearly, sometimes in a way that feels slightly unreal. A soft song playing to no one in particular. A bright chorus echoing gently down a hallway with only a few people in it. The same playlist doing its work. Whether the building is full or not, there's something honest about that. The mall is still trying to maintain the same atmosphere it was designed to have. Still trying to feel normal. Still trying to keep the interior from becoming too quiet, too sharp, too empty. Music is part of that maintenance, a kind of emotional climate control. It keeps the space from becoming silent, and silence, in a large building, can feel heavy. So the music continues. Sometimes it's upbeat when the corridor is slow. Sometimes it's soft when the corridor is empty. Sometimes it feels out of sync with what you see. But it keeps playing because the mall is still open, and open spaces are expected to have a soundtrack. In a quieter mall, you begin to notice where speakers are, where the sound is strongest, where it fades. You can walk from one zone to another and feel the music change texture, closer, then farther, then returning again, like a thin thread connecting the building together. And as a sensory detail, it becomes strangely calming. Because the music isn't demanding anything from you. It's not a concert. It's not a performance. It's just a steady layer meant to soften the edges of empty air. In this way, the mall soundtrack becomes less about energizing shoppers and more about keeping the interior from feeling too large. Music filling gaps instead of crowds. A gentle signal that the system is still running, that the building is still holding its mood, even when there are fewer people inside to notice it. In a quieter mall, you start to notice distance. Not just the distance you walk, but the distance you can see. Long sight lines open up when there are fewer visual interruptions, fewer open storefronts catching your attention, fewer clusters of people breaking up the hallway, fewer signs of movement pulling your eyes from one side to the other. So you look down a corridor and you can see far, the repeating lights overhead, The pattern of tiles underfoot, the same benches, the same planters, the same turns and intersections that were always there. Only now they feel more exposed. The building reveals its full length, and with those long sight lines comes a particular kind of calm. Not the calm of nature, where things shift and rustle and move. The calm of an engineered interior, steady, quiet, controlled. The air feels still, not because the ventilation isn't running, it is, but because there's less turbulence created by crowds, less door opening, less constant motion, less body heat rising and mixing. The mall's climate control holds the air in a gentle balance, and without many people moving through, that balance becomes easier to feel. You notice the softness of the temperature, the steady quality of the light, the way your footsteps and the music become the main activity. Even smells behave differently in still air. A faint hint of food might travel farther than it used to. A sweet smell from a shop might linger longer. Or there might be almost no smell at all, just clean, conditioned air, neutral and quiet. Long sight lines also change the psychology of the space. In a crowded mall, you focus on what's close, the store in front of you, the person passing by, the next turn. But in a quiet mall, you can see the whole stretch, and the scale becomes part of what you're experiencing. The mall feels bigger, more spacious, almost like it's holding its breath. And there's something gentle about that too, because a large interior with still air doesn't demand urgency. It encourages slower movement, longer pauses, a softer pace. The mall becomes a place where time doesn't feel pushed forward by crowds. It just sits. A long hallway under steady lights, a calm soundtrack floating through the distance, air that feels held in place, and a building that, even in its emptier years, continues to offer the same quiet thing it always offered, a controlled space where you can move slowly and where the stillness has room to spread out. Security in a mall is one of those systems you don't fully notice when it's working. It's meant to be present without being loud, a steady reminder that the space is managed, that someone is watching the corridors, not with suspicion, but with routine. In the peak years, security made sense in a simple way. Large crowds, long hours, lots of small transactions, lots of people passing each other. Any public space like that needs a visible layer of order. But in the long in-between, security becomes something quietly strange. Because the corridors can be calm, the storefronts can be dark, the crowds can be thin, and still the guards keep walking. Not because something is about to happen, because the system continues. A mall doesn't stop being a public environment just because fewer people use it. If it's open, it still has responsibilities. The building still has entrances to monitor, doors to check, sections to patrol, small issues to prevent from becoming bigger ones. So the guard's work becomes less about reacting and more about maintaining. Walking the loop, passing the same intersections, checking the same quiet corners, keeping the mood of someone is here. In a quieter mall, the guard can feel like the most visible moving element in the whole building. A steady figure passing through long sight lines, the soft sound of shoes on tile, a radio clipped to a belt, a brief nod in passing. And in a way, that presence becomes part of the mall's atmosphere. The same way lighting and music maintain comfort, security maintains a certain kind of calm. It helps the space feel stable, not exciting, not tense, just managed. There's also an economic detail here that's easy to miss. Security is a cost that doesn't shrink the way crowds shrink. In fact, sometimes it becomes more important in quiet spaces because emptiness can invite problems that busier spaces naturally discourage. A crowded corridor polices itself through visibility. A quiet corridor requires formal watching. So security continues even when demand is lower. Guards protecting mostly empty space is one of the clearest signs of a system operating past its peak. Not broken, not abandoned, still open, still responsible for itself, still spending money to keep the interior calm and orderly. A large building held together by routines, lights on, music playing, air steady, and a guard walking the hallway, protecting the space not because it's full, but because it's still there. In a mall, cameras are part of the architecture. They sit in corners, above entrances, near escalators, along long hallways. Quiet, fixed, always on. Most people don't look up at them. They blend into the ceiling the way sprinklers and lights do. They're simply part of what it means for the space to be managed. In the busy years, cameras watch crowds. They watch movement that was constant and messy and full of small interactions. 1,000 ordinary moments. People entering, leaving, carrying bags, stopping, talking, drifting. The cameras were there, but they weren't the story. In the long in-between, the cameras are still there. But now they're watching quiet. They're watching corridors where footsteps are occasional. They're watching stretches of tile where nothing happens for minutes at a time. They're watching closed storefront gates, reflective glass, still air. And there's something almost symbolic about that. Not dramatic, just quietly revealing. Because the system doesn't turn off. The mall's sense of order continues past demand. The cameras keep recording whether the corridor is full or empty. They keep scanning the same space, holding the same frame, maintaining the same posture of readiness. Cameras represent a kind of modern responsibility. If something happens, there should be a record. If there's a problem, it should be seen. Not necessarily stopped in the moment, but observed. And observation itself becomes part of what keeps a public space stable. In a quieter mall, you can sometimes feel the presence of that observation more clearly. Not in a paranoid way, in a structural way. A reminder that even in empty space, the building is still being watched, still being accounted for, still being maintained as a public interior. There's also a certain calm to it, because cameras are not emotional. They don't get tired, they don't get bored. They simply hold a view. They hold the hallway the way the building itself holds the air. Steady, continuous, uninterrupted. So the quiet corridor becomes a kind of monitored calm, a long interior stretch under steady lights, with a soft sense that the space is being cared for, not by crowds, but by systems. Cameras watching quiet corridors is another sign of the long in-between. A mall that continues to behave like a busy public place, even when the day inside it is slower. Even when the hallways have more space than sound. Even when the cameras mostly record stillness. In a quieter mall, safety stops feeling like a reaction to crowds. It becomes routine. Not the kind of routine you notice. The kind that quietly repeats day after day, whether anything happens or not. That's what safety looks like when it's built into a system. A guard making the same loop at the same pace. A camera holding the same hallway. A door checked, a lock tested, an entrance observed. A small issue handled early, before it becomes a larger one. Most of this isn't dramatic, it's practical. Because a mall is a public interior, and public interiors have responsibilities even when they aren't busy. If the mall is open, it has to feel stable. It has to feel safe enough that people don't hesitate at the entrance. So safety becomes a kind of maintenance, similar to lighting and climate control. It's part of the building's baseline promise. This space is watched. This space is managed. This space is meant to be calm. And in a way, safety as routine can be more important when the mall is quieter. A busy place has natural visibility. Crowds create informal supervision. A quiet place has fewer witnesses, fewer eyes, fewer casual signals that everything is normal. So the systems take over. The routines become the substitute for the crowd. In the long in-between, you can see how many layers of routine support something as simple as being open. Emergency exits have to remain clear. Hallways have to stay lit. Escalators have to be safe. Bathrooms have to be monitored. Parking areas have to be checked. Not because danger is certain, because responsibility is constant. And this kind of routine safety creates a particular mood. It doesn't feel like an alarm. It feels like a steady hand on the building. A quiet assurance that the space is still being held together, that someone is still showing up to keep it orderly. So the mall remains available, not thriving, not closed, still operating. And safety is part of what allows that operating to continue. Not as a dramatic response to problems, but as a repeated, predictable routine. A set of actions that happen whether you're watching them or not. A system staying in place so the space can stay calm. Even in the long in-between, the mall still creates jobs. Not always the jobs people imagine when they picture a busy shopping day, but the steady jobs that remain when a large building keeps operating. Some of these jobs are visible: cashiers behind counters, people working in the few open stores, employees at service desks, food workers preparing simple meals in the same repeating motions, workers unlocking gates in the morning and pulling them down at night. But many of the jobs that still exist are the jobs that keep the building itself alive. Maintenance staff checking systems, cleaning crews resetting the environment over and over, security making their rounds, people handling deliveries, trash, minor repairs, small emergencies that never make a headline. This is one of the quiet realities of a mall. It is a workplace before it is a shopping experience. And when the mall becomes quieter, that workplace becomes more central to its identity because the building doesn't run itself. Someone has to be there. Someone has to manage the temperature. Someone has to keep the lights steady. Someone has to keep escalators safe and hallways clean. Someone has to unlock the doors, monitor the space, and respond when something breaks. So even if fewer stores are open, the mall remains a small employment ecosystem, a cluster of steady paychecks tied to a single large structure, not glamorous, not always high-paying, but real and local. These are jobs that often belong to the immediate area, jobs that don't require a long commute, jobs that follow regular schedules, jobs that come with routines: open, close, clean, stock, patrol, repair, repeat. In a region built around commuting and time pressure, routine work can be a kind of stability. It offers predictable hours, a familiar environment, a workplace you can return to without starting over. So when we talk about the mall as local infrastructure, we start here, with the fact that it still employs people, it still supports work, it still creates a reason for some people to leave home in the morning and come to the same building they've come to for years. In a thriving mall, jobs blend into the crowd. In a quieter mall, jobs become the proof that the system still functions. Because the mall isn't only a consumer space, it's an operating space, a building that still requires human presence. And as long as it is open, those jobs still exist, quietly holding the place together, one shift at a time. As malls get quieter, one of their most practical uses becomes easier to see. They are indoor walking space, not a gym in the traditional sense, not a park, but a long, level, climate-controlled loop where people can move through distance without weather, without hills, and without needing to buy anything to belong there. In a place with humid summers and raw winters, that matters, because the outdoors isn't always inviting. Heat can feel heavy, cold can feel sharp, rain can make sidewalks slippery and unpleasant, and for many people, especially older visitors or anyone managing aches, balance, or endurance, weather becomes a barrier to staying active. The mall removes that barrier. The temperature is steady, the floor is smooth, the lighting is consistent. There are benches when you need to rest. Bathrooms are nearby. Water can be found. And if you walk the same loop a few times, you begin to know it like a route. You know where the turns are. You know where it gets quieter. You know which stretch feels longest. You can measure your day in laps, gently, without pressure. This kind of walking is not about performance. It's about keeping the body moving, keeping circulation going, keeping stiffness from settling in. A simple routine that keeps a person connected to the day. And in the long in-between, the mall's role as walking space becomes a form of local infrastructure. Because it's not just private comfort, it's a public environment that remains accessible. You don't have to pay to enter, you don't have to sign up, you don't have to be good at exercise, and you just show up and walk. In a thriving era, malls were built to keep shoppers inside longer. Now, even with fewer shoppers, the same design supports something else: a safe, predictable place to move. And that's a kind of usefulness that doesn't show up in sales numbers the same way. It shows up in routines, in the familiar sight of people walking slowly in the morning, in the small nods between repeat visitors, in the quiet comfort of knowing there's a place you can go, indoors, to take a lap and feel your body loosen. So when we reframe the mall as infrastructure, this is part of the story. The building still offers a public, climate-controlled pathway, a long interior sidewalk, a place where movement is possible in every season, and even now in its quieter years, the mall continues to provide that simple service: steady air, steady light, and enough space to keep walking. When a place has been around long enough, it begins to offer something that isn't for sale. Familiarity. Not the flashy kind of value, but the quiet kind. Value that comes from knowing where you are without thinking, knowing the turns, knowing the entrances, knowing which hallway leads where, knowing where to park, where to sit, where the bathrooms are, where the light feels softer, where the walk feels easiest. Familiarity reduces effort, and in a busy life, reduced effort is worth something. A mall like Marley Station can become a default place simply because it's understood. You don't have to learn it again. You don't have to navigate a new layout, a new parking situation, a new set of rules, a new atmosphere. You already know the routine. You already know what to expect. That expectation creates comfort, and comfort creates repeat visits, even when the mall isn't thriving. Because for many people, the mall is not only a shopping location. It's a memory of how errands used to feel, how weekend time used to feel, how indoor public space used to feel. Steady, contained, predictable. Familiarity can also be social in a soft way. Not dramatic reunions, just recognition. Seeing the same faces, the same walkers, the same employees. The same quiet nods that say, yes, I come here too. A small sense of being part of a shared routine, even if no one talks, even if everyone is in their own day. And familiarity has another value that doesn't show up on a lease spreadsheet. It lowers anxiety. In unfamiliar places, the mind stays slightly alert. Where am I? Where do I go? What's the quickest way out? What if I need something? In a familiar place, the mind softens. You can drift, you can walk, you can pause, you can let the building hold you for a while. This is especially true as the mall gets quieter. Less crowding, less noise, less pressure to move quickly. The familiar layout becomes a calm container, a place where you can take your time because you're not trying to decode anything. So even as certain parts of the mall change, stores coming and going, signs shifting, some gates staying down, something deeper remains stable. The shape of the corridors, the feel of the air, the basic map of the interior, the sense that this is a place you've known for a long time. And that is a kind of local infrastructure too, because in communities, familiarity is part of how people stay connected to place, not through grand symbols, but through repeatable environments. A mall like this can continue to matter, not because it's exciting, but because it's known, because it's one of the few large indoor spaces that still offers the same simple promise it always offered. Come in, walk a little, do what you need to do, and feel for a moment like you know exactly where you are. Every morning the mall opens, not as a dramatic gesture, more like a habit the building continues to perform. Keys turn, locks release, doors swing wide, lights come on in the same steady pattern. Somewhere inside, a gate rises with a familiar metal sound. A hallway that was silent overnight becomes usable again. This is one of the quiet truths of Marley Station in the long in-between. It is still a place that starts its day on purpose, even when the parking lot is thin, even when most storefronts are dark, even when the building feels larger than it needs to be. Someone still shows up. Someone still checks the entrances. Someone still makes sure the interior is stable. Temperature, lighting, cleanliness, safety. So the space can be ready for whoever arrives. And the arrivals do happen. A few walkers early in the day, moving gently through the corridors, employees unlocking their small zones of work, a person coming in for a specific errand, moving with quiet intention, someone sitting for a moment on a bench, resting in the controlled air. None of it needs to be crowded to be real, because open doesn't always mean busy. Open simply means available. It means the mall is still keeping its promise. If you need an indoor place today, here it is. If you need a familiar hallway, it's still here. If you need the simple convenience of a large interior space that behaves predictably, it still exists. And that morning unlocking is more than a detail. It's an ongoing decision, a building held together by routines, a system that continues to operate without applause. No big prediction about what happens next, just the present tense. The doors still unlock each day. The lights still come on. The air still holds steady. And the mall for now continues to open, one morning at a time. There is a kind of waiting that isn't anxious, a waiting that doesn't lean forward, a waiting that simply exists. That's what the long in-between can feel like inside a place like Marley Station. The building is still here, still open, still maintained, and yet it no longer carries the same urgency it once did. It doesn't need to prove itself every day. It doesn't need to be full to be functioning. So it waits, quietly, without expectation. In a thriving era, malls had a forward momentum. New stores coming in, seasonal rushes, crowds that made the corridors feel alive even on an ordinary afternoon. The building felt like it was being used in the way it was designed to be used. Now the mall holds a different posture. Less push, less demand, more patience. The hallways are ready, but not insistent. The lights are on, but not calling for attention. The music plays, but it isn't trying to create excitement. It's simply maintaining a mood. And you can feel that patience in the spaces between things, in the distance between footsteps, in the long sightlines, in the still air, in the way an empty storefront can sit quietly for months without the building reacting. The mall doesn't panic, it continues. It holds itself steady, as if waiting is part of its job now. And that kind of waiting tells us something gentle about systems. Not every system ends with a crash. Sometimes a system slows and adapts. It becomes less central, but still useful. It continues to open, continue to employ, continue to provide small services, walking space, climate-controlled calm, familiarity, without promising a return to the past. Waiting without expectation is a form of realism. It doesn't demand a comeback story. It doesn't demand a tragedy. It simply acknowledges the present, a place operating below its intended capacity, but still operating. And in a sleep documentary, that's a peaceful truth, because it means we don't have to force a conclusion. We don't have to predict the future. We can simply notice what's here. A mall that is no longer rushing toward anything. A building that has settled into patience. A place that remains available day after day, even if it no longer expects to be full again. Just waiting, quietly, without expectation. And that brings us to the soft ending of this case study, because what we've been watching at Marley Station isn't a sudden collapse. It's something quieter, a system slowing down, a large machine built for volume, learning how to operate with less traffic turning into footsteps, less wandering, less unplanned time spent inside, but not nothing, not empty in the absolute sense, not ended, still open, still maintained, still doing its quiet work. In a way, the most honest thing we can say about a place like this is that it continues, not as a symbol, not as a warning, not as a punchline, just as a real building in a real corridor held together by routines, a few stores with their lights on, a few workers showing up for their shifts, a few visitors walking slowly in the steady air, a few errands that still happen here, because convenience isn't only digital. Sometimes it's simply knowing where you are and how to get what you need. And as we end, it helps to remember what the mall originally promised. It promised comfort, a controlled interior, a predictable environment, a place where the day could be handled under one roof. And even now, in its quieter years, that promise hasn't disappeared. It's just being asked to carry a different kind of life. Less crowd life, more routine life, more still here life, more of that long in-between that doesn't fit into headlines. This is why it feels important to speak about it gently, because the word decline can sound like a verdict. And what we've really seen is adaptation, a shift in use, a reduction in intensity, a slowing, a system that is no longer at the center of the retail world, but is still part of the local world, still offering shelter from weather, still offering a long hallway for walking, still offering a place to sit under steady lights, still offering work for the people who keep it running, still offering familiarity, which is its own kind of value. So if you're listening and you've been to Marley Station, or any mall like it, you don't have to feel a certain way about it. You don't have to be nostalgic. You don't have to be sad. You don't have to be critical. You can simply notice the quiet reality. Some systems don't end all at once. They slow. They thin out. They change shape. They keep opening in the morning because that's what they were built to do. And maybe that's enough. Not a comeback story, not a tragedy, just a place continuing, one day at a time, while the world around it chooses different patterns. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening to Gentle Economics. If you made it this far, I hope the pace was calm, and I hope the story felt gentle, more like a quiet walk than a lecture. If you're listening in bed, you can let your thoughts loosen now. You don't have to hold on to any of the details, just the feeling of steady lights, long hallways, and a building that keeps its routine. If you enjoyed this kind of slow, grounded case study, you can follow the channel for more sleep documentaries like this. More ordinary systems, more quiet infrastructure, more places that don't shout their stories, but still have one. And if you'd like to help Gentle Economics reach more listeners, a simple like or comment tells the platform that this calm content matters. Either way, I'm grateful you were here. We'll end where we began, with a place that still opens, a set of doors that still unlock each day, a system slowing, not ending. Good night.
The lights stay on a little longer, down a hallway wide and still, air like a steady promise, holding quiet on the hill, out on Ritchie Highway drifting. Cars pass soft like distant rain, and Marley Station keeps on breathing, even when it's not the same. So good night, thanks for listening. Thanks for walking slow with me through the gentle ordinary systems, through the quiet in between. If your day felt heavy, let it loose and let it fade. We'll be here at Marley Station one more quiet day. Some gates are down and waiting, some small lights are open late. The cleaner turns a corner like a calm and patient fate. Escalators hum or rest now, still as stairs that never move, and the food court holds its echoes like a lullaby in grooves. So good night, thanks for listening. Thanks for walking slow with me through the gentle ordinary systems, through the quiet in between. If your mind is racing, let it drift like distant rain. Marley Station for one more quiet day. No big ending, no predictions, just doors that open in the morning place that keeps its shape. Good night, thanks for listening. Thanks for staying for the end. For the steady lights and long hauls. For the slow, unhurried bend. Close your eyes, keep breathing. Let the night take what it can. We'll be here at Marley Station, and we'll do it all again. Lights stay on a little longer, down a hallway wide and still, air like a steady promise, holding quiet on the hill. Out on Ritchie Highway drifting, cars pass soft like distant rain. And Marley Station keeps on breathing, even when it's not the same. So good night, thanks for listening. Thanks for walking slow with me through the gentle ordinary systems, through the quiet in between. If your day felt heavy, let it loosen, let it fade. We'll be here at Marley Station for one more quiet day. Some gates are down and waiting. Some small lights are open late. A cleaner turns a corner, like a calm and patient fate. Escalators hum more rest now, still as stairs that never move. And the food court holds its echoes, like a lullaby in grooves. So good night, thanks for listening. Thanks for walking slow with me through the gentle ordinary systems, through the quiet in between. If your mind is racing, let it drift like distant rain. We'll be here at Marley Station for one more quiet day. No big ending, no predictions, just doors that open in the morning and a place that keeps its shape. Good night, thanks for listening. Thanks for staying for the end, for the steady what it can. We'll be here at Marley Station, and we'll do it all again. Lights stay on a little longer, down a hallway wide and still, air like a steady promise, holding quiet on the hill. Out on Ritchie Highway drifting, cars pass soft like distant rain, and Marley Station keeps on breathing, even when it's not the same. So good night, thanks for listening, thanks for walking slow with me through the gentle ordinary systems, through the quiet in between. If your day felt heavy, let it loosen, let it fade. We'll be here at Marley Station for one more quiet day. Some gates are down and waiting, some small lights are open late. A cleaner turns a corner, like a calm and patient fate. Escalators hum or rest now, still as stairs that never move. And the food court holds its echoes, like a lullaby in grooves. So good night, thanks for listening, thanks for walking slow with me through the gentle ordinary systems, through the quiet in between. If your mind is racing, let it drift like distant rain. We'll be here at Marley Station for one more quiet day. Big ending, no predictions, just doors that open in the morning and a place that keeps its shape. Good night, thanks for listening, thanks for staying for the end, for the steady lights and long halls, for the slow unhurried bend. Close your eyes, keep breathing, let the night take what it can. She'll be here at Marley Station.